There are moments in life when words simply leave us, not because we are angry or hurt, but because an experience is so far beyond our understanding that language itself becomes inadequate. It might be the moment you hold a newborn grandchild, feeling a love you never knew you could contain. It might be standing at the edge of the ocean at sunrise, watching light dance across endless waters. Or it might be receiving news that changes everything you thought you knew about your future, leaving you breathless with a sense of wonder. In these moments, silence is not an absence. It is the presence of something too large for words, too sacred for explanation. Today, we sit with a story about such a silence. The silence of Zechariah, a priest who encountered heaven and lost his voice for 9 months. This is not a story about punishment. It is a story about preparation, about the kind of transformation that can only happen when we stop trying to explain everything and simply let mystery do its work. This is a story for anyone who has ever felt that life has rendered them speechless, for anyone in a season where the usual words no longer fit and the old prayers feel empty. Zechariah was old, not just in years, but with the weariness from a lifetime of unfulfilled longing. He and his wife Elizabeth had prayed for a child for so long that the prayer itself had become part of the rhythm of their days, like breathing. They watched friends celebrate births and attended countless baby dedications, whispering hopeful prayers until the words felt worn thin. In their culture, childlessness was not just a private grief, but a public shame, often seen as a sign of divine displeasure. They bore not only the sorrow of empty arms, but also the quiet judgment of their community. Eventually, they made a fragile peace with the silence where their children's laughter should have been, finding meaning in service rather than the family they had dreamed of. But Zechariah was also a priest, and priests have duties. The temple keeps its own time. Priestly service was divided among 24 courses, and for most, the opportunity to burn incense in the holy place, the sacred chamber where God's presence was said to dwell, came once in a lifetime, if at all. It was chosen by lot. On this particular day, the lot fell to Zechariah. After decades of faithful, routine service, he was chosen for this most sacred privilege. Perhaps he saw it as a final gift from God, a consolation for a life of service without the one reward he had most deeply desired. He entered the holy place. The air was thick with centuries of prayers, heavy with the weight of countless encounters between the divine and the human. It was supposed to be routine. Light the incense, say the prescribed prayers, and let the smoke carry the people's petitions up to heaven. But heaven had other plans. The angel appeared without warning. Gabriel, whose very presence seemed to fill the small space with something too bright, too vast, too impossible to absorb. The familiar walls of the holy place suddenly felt thin, as if they might dissolve under the weight of heaven pressing close. Gabriel spoke words that should have been pure joy. "Do not be afraid, Zechariah. Your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you will call him John. He will be a joy and delight to you, and many will rejoice because of his birth." Imagine that moment. The answer to a lifetime of prayers delivered by a messenger from heaven itself. Yet Zechariah's response was not worship or gratitude. It was doubt. How can I be sure of this? I am an old man, and my wife is well along in years. It is a deeply human response. Even when heaven speaks, our first instinct is often to list our limitations, to protect ourselves from the disappointment of renewed hope. Zechariah had lived with God's silence in this one area for so long that when God finally spoke, the sound was too overwhelming to believe. Gabriel's reply was swift. "I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God, and I have been sent to tell you this good news. And now you will be silent and not able to speak until the day this happens, because you did not believe my words, which will come true at their appointed time." Silence, not the gentle silence of contemplation, but the enforced silence of a voice taken away. 9 months stretched ahead of him, an uncharted territory to be navigated without the compass of his own words. If this were a modern story, we might call it punishment. But what if we have been reading it wrong? What if this silence was not a penalty, but a sacred preparation? Zechariah was to become the father of John the Baptist, the voice who would cry out in the wilderness, "Prepare the way of the Lord." How do you prepare to father a voice that will change the world? Perhaps by learning what it means to live without your own words. For 9 months, Zechariah watched his wife's body change, each subtle shift a small miracle, confirming Gabriel's words. He saw Elizabeth's face transform from resignation to the quiet wonder of new life stirring within her. He could not call his friends to share the news. He could not stand in the synagogue and testify. All he could do was watch and listen and wait. And in that enforced stillness, something profound was happening. The man who had been quick to question heaven was learning to trust without explanation. The priest, worn down by routine, was remembering what it felt like to be amazed by God. The husband, who had learned to live with a painful silence, was discovering that some silences are full of presence, not absence. In their shared quiet, Zechariah and Elizabeth developed a new language of glances, of gestures, of presence. He learned to listen not just with his ears, but with his whole being. He would place his hand on her growing belly, and they would share the wonder without a word. The silence was not stealing his voice. It was transforming his heart. There are some things that can only be learned in silence. Some transformations can only happen when we are not busy explaining, defending, or trying to make sense of everything. In the noise of our constant commentary, we sometimes miss the subtle work God is doing in the depths of our souls. We talk our way past the very mysteries meant to change us. Silence creates space, space for wonder, for questions that do not need immediate answers, for the kind of slow, deep work that changes us from the inside out. Maybe you are in such a season now. Maybe circumstances have left you feeling you cannot speak of your dreams, or loss has taken your confidence, or disappointment has made you afraid to hope out loud. Maybe the old words about faith feel foreign in your mouth because they do not match your experience. If so, Zechariah's story is for you. Your silence might not be the end of your story. It might be the preparation for a chapter you could not have imagined. The months passed. The day came when their son was born, and the long wait culminated in the cry of new life. When the time came for the naming ceremony, family and neighbors assumed the boy would be named Zechariah after his father. It was tradition. But Elizabeth surprised them, saying firmly, "No, he is to be called John." When they protested, they turned to the silent father. They made signs to him, asking what he wished the child to be called. Zechariah asked for a writing tablet, and with careful, deliberate strokes, he wrote the words that would break his 9-month silence. "His name is John." And immediately, his mouth was opened and his tongue was freed, and he began to speak, praising God. But notice what happened. When his voice returned, It was not the same one that had questioned the angel. This was a voice transformed by silence, a voice that turned immediately to praise, not doubt. It spoke with the authority of someone who had learned to trust beyond explanation. His first words were not complaints about his silence, but a prophecy that flowed from a place excavated by quiet. Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, because he has come to help his people and has redeemed them. These were not the words of a man merely happy to speak again. They were the words of someone who had been profoundly changed. The man who once needed proof now spoke with certainty of God's faithfulness. The priest whose service had become routine now overflowed with fresh worship. The husband who had questioned God's ability to give him a child now prophesied about the role that child would play in God's great story. Doubt had been transformed into declaration. Silence had done its work, not by taking something away, but by giving him something new, a deeper trust, a clearer vision, a voice that could speak not just his own thoughts, but God's heart. Perhaps that is what silence is doing in your life. It is not removing your ability to speak your truth. It is preparing you to speak a truth you have not yet discovered. There is a beautiful symmetry here. John the Baptist would grow up to be a voice in the wilderness. His father first learned to be a voice that had passed through his own wilderness of silence. The boy who would prepare the way for Jesus was raised by a man who had learned what it meant to let God prepare the way in his own heart. If you are walking through a season where words feel inadequate, consider this. Maybe you are not losing your voice. Maybe you are being prepared for a voice you have not yet found. Maybe the silence is not empty, but full of the transformation that can only happen when we stop trying to explain everything and simply let God work in ways beyond our understanding. Zechariah's 9 months of silence led to a lifetime of speaking with renewed authority. What might your season of silence be preparing you for? As we sit in this quiet moment, remember that silence does not mean God has stopped listening or that your prayers have been forgotten. Sometimes, silence is God's way of saying, I am working on something in you that requires your full attention, something that cannot happen while you are busy talking. The stars above us tell their story in perfect silence. Their light reaches us across impossible distances, speaking without words of beauty, of mystery, of the steady faithfulness of the one who set them in their courses. They shine not because they have something to prove, but because they have something to give, flowing from the depths of their being without need for words. You too are being written into a story larger than you can see. Even in your silence, especially in your silence, you are part of something magnificent unfolding. Trust the silence. Let it do its work. Your voice will return when it is time. And when it does, it will speak with an authority that only comes from having been transformed by the quiet presence of God. If this story has given you a place to rest, you can simply press the like button as a quiet prayer, a way of saying, I trust you are working even when I cannot speak. And for now, like Zechariah, we rest in the knowledge that God's timing is perfect and his silence is never empty. Let the stars above remind you, even in the vast quiet of space, love is writing your name. Breathe deeply. Trust completely. Rest peacefully.